All right, I think we're live now. Hello, everyone. My name is Joanna, and I'm here with my lovely co-hosts for the Song of Ice, a Song of Ice and Fire read along or reread along, depending on whether you've read it before, for 2023. So thank you all so much for joining us. I am so excited about this read along. Actually, before I go into, thank you all so much for joining us. I have an echo. Sorry. Forgot I had that on. So I think that I'm going to go ahead and talk about the general format of this read along or reread along. And then I'm also going to talk about but before I even get to that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about how this came about, because I think, word got out like wildfire about how this read along was happening. And so I just want to go ahead and say that this was actually Joanna Sousa's idea originally, who's here with us. And so Joanna approached me earlier in the year after we had a fun discussion on her channel. And we talked about doing this read along together. And both of us were eager to reread this series. And I said, I think I have to wait till 2023 to do this if I'm going to do it. But I was ready for it. It's been about 10 years since I've read the series. And then Yolene from Yolene Reads, who's going to be joining us here in a little bit, also decided to join in. And so the three of us were going to do this together. And there was a bit of a break where Yolene and Joanna were taking a little bit of a break from BookTube. And meanwhile, we started just revising our plans for this. And I decided to go ahead and invite two more people, because I thought, why not have five of us? Each one of us can introduce a book or host a live show for a book. And so that's what we're going to do. Each one of us is going to host one of the books, the live shows in the books. And then we're going to each do a secondary live show. So those first live shows per book are going to include the five of us, and as long as we can make it work in our schedules. And then the secondary live show, which will take place a week later, we're going to do our best to invite as many different channels as possible to get more people involved, because I know there are tons of people who've said that they are going to be reading with us who also have channels. And so we want to get as many people feeling included as possible. And we're excited. We're excited to hear what other people think about the series, especially those who've never read the series before. And we know we have a bunch of people like that in the read along, like Theo. So speaking of which, hello, Theo. Thank you so much. We are so excited about what you are especially going to think as a first-time reader. But we also have a lot of people who are going to be rereading the series. For example, I know that Derry, who's in the chat, is also going to be rereading the series. And some other people too who have said that they are going to be reading along with us or reading it for the first time. So we're excited about that and hoping to get as many people involved as possible. But the first live show for the first book for Game of Thrones, I'm going to be hosting that. And so that's going to take place on February 4th at this time. So we're going to try to keep our live shows on Saturdays at this time. And let me just double check. I think I said February 4th. And then the second live show is going to be...
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, the second live show is going to be February 11th. So that means our general talk live show for Game of Thrones, the first one, spoiler filled, will be on February 4th at 2 p.m. EST this time. And that'll be here on my channel. A week later, that Saturday, I'll host a secondary live show in which I'll try to bring some other channels to come on the channel to discuss maybe characters or special highlights or any sort of focused topic. And that's going to be the general format moving forward. So I know we probably have some other questions, like how often we're going to be meeting and things like that. We're not at this point planning to do one book per month, but we will probably do it every 1 month to 2 months, I think is the general idea that we have in mind.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I've talked enough. I'm going to go ahead and let my lovely co-hosts introduce themselves, their channels, and what book they're going to be presenting. So starting off, I already talked about Joanna, but Joanna, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Joanna. So thank you for hosting this and thank you for being the
creator and organizer of all this, because like you said, I was gone for a while, and it was nice to have someone to keep the momentum going. So my channel is my name, Joana Souza. I talk about books, specifically fantasy. Fantasy is my favorite genre. My favorite authors are George R. R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Robin Hobb, Joe Abercrombie, and John Gwynne. Those are like my top 5. I love them to death. I love their books to death. Some of them I haven't read everything yet, so I have a lot to discover still. And I will be hosting a Clash of Kings, and this beautiful edition. It's not this one I'm going to read, because I'm going to write in these books like it's going out of style. Like I'm like, there's probably going to be more color in it than not at the end. And my special discussion is going to be on the chapter of The House of the Undying, because I am dying to have people to talk about that chapter. Yeah, it's corny puns. And so the House of the Undying, I just think it's so fascinating with all what's already happened, what's going to happen. And so if you are a House of the Undying fan, you should talk to me, and we can talk about it on my channel.
Great. And then Alex, you're next.
Yeah, so I'm Alex. I run the channel Tall Guy Reads, where I talk about books and science fiction, fantasy, horror primarily. And I am going to be talking about and introducing the 3rd book in the series, which is A Storm of Swords, which is widely considered by a lot of people to be the best book in the series in terms of just overall everything that happens in that book. And I would agree. I don't have my copies in the other room, but I'm very excited for this, because I think this is... I always go back between this one and the first book in the series being my favorite of the series, just for like nostalgia reasons. But the 3rd book in the series, I probably read the second many times out of all the books in the series. And I think the amount of things that happen in that book is absolutely insane, to the point where many other authors, it would have taken them multiple books to write that book. And so that book, I think from beginning to end, is pretty fantastic. And so I'm extremely excited to talk about that one. So we will be doing, obviously, the spoiler-filled discussion between us on that book. And then we'll be doing a more specified talk on certain events that happen within that book as we get to that. But yeah.
I can already imagine what you're going to be talking about for that particular book.
Oh, yeah.
And really quickly, I got a question here about what Discord should I join? I personally don't have a Discord, but I am pretty active on the Discord that Alex has, which is the Grimoire Discord. So that's a Discord that's kind of co-owned by Alex and with Theo, Rekindled Reader, and RJ Gibson. So they have a Song of Ice and Fire thread there. And so if you want to join us there, that'd be a fantastic place. I know Mike from Mike's Book Reviews is also a huge fan and has a lot of activity over on his Discord as well. And I could be found there as well if you ever want to ping any of us. I think we're all in there too. But Alex's Discord is a great community too, the Grimoire Discord. So I did go ahead and link that Discord down in the description.
Yeah, I think we're also going to be there's like a separate read-along section within that Discord. And so I think we are going to be having threads for each book as we move through the series, just for everyone to talk about whatever they want if it's related to that specific book. So
perfect. All right, Scott.
Yeah, I'm Scott. I'm on Bald Booktuber. That's my channel. And Song of Ice and Fire is by far my favorite thing. So I'm super excited about this. I will be hosting A Feast for Crows, which I happen to think is a very, very good book that is much maligned as less than somehow. It's not my favorite in the series because Storm of Swords is my favorite in any series, but I do think it is some of George's best writing, so I'm very looking forward to those discussions.
Excellent. Well, honestly, I love all 5 books.
Yeah,
so I know that the 3rd book does get the most praise, and it is a fantastic book. But I personally love all 5 books. I think they're all worth reading. And I know Yolene is not here yet. So Yolene from Yolene Reads will be the host for A Dance of Dragons, book 5. And so from here, I just want to go around our little circle here and talk about whether you are reading. Well, I think we're all rereading it, but maybe talk about how you got introduced to the series, when you read it, or how many times you've read it, and its place in fantasy for you personally, or what you love about it. I'll go last, but you all in the chat, feel free to share whether you're reading this for the first time if you haven't shared that yet, how many times you've reread it, if you've reread it, and that sort of thing. So let's
Jonah,
go
I
ahead.
think Jolene is in the. Can you see her? Because she's messaged us in the.
Oh, I
private chat.
can't. Okay,
Oh,
I see her
good.
now. She was on the.
there she
I had to
is.
scroll up.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm
Hi.
a little bit late.
That's all right. Actually, you're kind of perfectly timed because we were just talking about Dance of Dragons, which Yolene will be hosting for us. So, Yolene, tell us about your channel and about anything you want to share.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, again, sorry that I'm late. I was having some insulin pump issues, but it's fine now. So yeah, I do have a small booktube channel called Jolene Reads, where I primarily talk about fantasy. And I have been saying since I started that channel that A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite series of all time. But it has been 10 years since I've read it. So I'm very excited to reread it and also a little bit nervous to see if it stood the test of time, you could say.
Mhm.
Great. So, was that your first? You've
Sounds like
only
yes.
read it once, Yolene?
I've only read it once. I think that the show was starting to air on TV, 2011, something like that.
Mm.
And I watched the first episode and I thought, okay, I need to read the books. So
Wow.
I just tried the first one. I never read fantasy before, so it was actually also my introduction to fantasy. I wasn't a big reader as a child, and I fell in love.
Oh, that's neat because it sounds like you and I read those books at the same exact time. That's exactly when I read them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that the show was a huge impact on a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go. I guess let's go counterclockwise. So, Joanna, you want to tell us about how you got introduced to the series, and how many have
Yeah.
you read it, the whole series, or
No. So the way I got introduced to this is just like Yolene. I wasn't a very big reader as a kid, and I definitely didn't read fantasy. I was always like that person that's like, I will never read fantasy because I don't know why. I was dumb. And then I started reading more fantasy. And then I was introduced to Game of Thrones by my ex, actually. He was like, I think you would love this because you like it when people die. And I was like, yeah, that's true. So we started watching it, and I was loving it. But episode 9 of season 1 was when I was like, okay, I'm in this. It's the end for me. I am now, like it's forever. So much so that I got a tattoo in homage to Game of Thrones because of how much I love it. It's a dragon.
Nice.
So this show means a lot to me. It's what rekindled my love for reading. It rekindled my love for adult fantasy, especially grimdark. It changed the person that I am, the way that I see things. It's a bit dramatic, I know. I love this show. The other day I was visiting a friend, and we were walking through Paris, and we were talking the whole day about A Song of Ice and Fire and Robin Hobb. That's the only stuff we talked about. And I was like, yes, these are my people. Yesterday I was calling with one of my best friends, and she just started the show, and she was like, oh, I love Rob Stark. And I was like, good, yeah, and like all these characters, she's like, I think this person is great. I was like, trying to be poker face. And then she's like, I can't wait to talk to you about it. I was like, okay, me neither. When you're done, just tell me. And so after starting the show, I started reading the books. And it was during the off season between, I think, 6 and 7 or something like that. And I read the first 3 books. And then I was like, this is going to break my heart if I get to book 5 and I don't have anything. So I didn't read A Feast for Crows and Storm of Swords. However, I have read Fire and Blood. I finished it yesterday. And I have read Dunk and Egg. And I've read like the world books, World of Ice and Fire, all of that. I've watched House of the Dragon, of course. Absolutely a big fan. And I've watched probably thousands of hours of content online, whether it be reviews. Like I watched every single discussion that Scott you had with Madison and Mike.
Oh,
I watched all of the In Deep Geek stuff. Like I love his channel. Great. I watched those channels so much that so much so that I know their voices. Like they bring me comfort now. It's like, yeah. So this series is everything. I love it so much, and I could talk about it forever. So Scott, you go ahead.
I'm just kind of mind blown because you even got a tattoo.
Yeah. Like this show means so much to me. And of course, if someone's like, is it Game of Thrones? I'm like, well, technically it's just a dragon, but it is because of that show. Yes.
Wow. I'm so excited. I'm so excited, Joanna, and especially because you haven't read books 4 and 5 yet.
I do know what happens. I mean, I know about Young Griff. I know all of that. I tell you, I've watched so many videos. And I've read them.
You're still going to love them. I'm so excited, though. I'm so excited to be doing this with you. So thank you again, Joanna, for being the one responsible for this actually happening.
Thank you guys for joining. I'm so happy.
Yeah. And Scott.
Yeah, accidentally, as it happens. So As a teenager, I was way into Lord of the Rings. I didn't think anything could ever touch it. That was my intro to fantasy, my intro to books, really. And then looking around for something, I guess, comparable or something that I thought would hold up, and just randomly looking at the aisles at Barnes and Noble, and happened upon the first 3 books of story, way before the show was even an idea, way before Feast for Crows was published. So I was reading this series before many people were born there in the chat. So there you go. So Old Man River here. So I think the first 3 I've probably read 6 or 7 times, maybe. And I think I've read all of it about 4 times. My last reread was about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's been a while. So
That's amazing. I want to.
That is. So if I understand correctly, was this supposed to be a trilogy? I think that somebody told me that it was supposed to be a trilogy initially.
Yeah, his initial plan was for a trilogy, but George is not good at planning. I love the man dearly, but planning is not his thing. And so that trilogy became 5 books, which became 7 books, which became, whatever we're going to get.
Yeah.
Wow. Great. And then Alex.
Yeah, so I'm kind of similar to you, Joanna, and Joanna, in that when the show came out at that time, I was actually in high school, on the later end of high school, and I basically all my adult fantasy was like Lord of the Rings and Tolkien and all that stuff. And I was also reading like totally other genres at the time, so like thrillers and mysteries and whatever else I was reading at that point in my life. And then that first season came out, and I remember watching it with my dad. And as soon as it was over, I was like, well, I have to go read the books. And that's basically brought me back into fantasy as a genre overall. And I read the whole series, absolutely loved it. Looked for every Reddit, YouTube video and thread I could possibly find about speculation. And as the seasons just kept coming out, I just kept basically every single year I wanted to reread it. So I think overall I've read the whole series twice, but the first 3 books I've read probably 4 times, because it's one of those things where I'll get inspired to go reread it again, and I'll read book 1 or book 1 and 2, and then I'll go find something else, and I'll never actually do a full reread. So I am very excited for this, because A Feast for Crows and Dance of Dragons I haven't read for many years at this point, so I'm very excited to reread that. And the first 3 I just love to death. So I'm very excited for this entire thing, because this really introduced me to adult fantasy that wasn't Tolkien and wasn't everything I thought it was at that point of my life. So yeah.
Same here. Actually, I got into it, because the show was coming out, that was part of it. But I also had some friends who had been longtime fans of this series, to the point where they said that even when book 5 came out, they would always say, A Song of Ice and Fire, damn you, Martin, because he apparently was already famous for taking forever between books. Even back then.
Like 5 years.
He didn't even take nearly as much time between books back then as he has between 5 and our Winds of Winter we keep hearing about. Yeah. So I had heard about him, nothing but praise from a couple of friends of mine. And I was very intimidated, honestly, getting into the series, because I was not very well read in adult fantasy. I really actually hadn't read very much at all of adult fantasy. Just a little bit of Tolkien, and I read some Elric and some Eddings, but I still felt like it still felt intimidating to me for some reason. And so I thought, I'm just going to take it really, really slowly. I'm just going to take my time with this series. I'm going to be okay if I don't understand everything. And I started the first book, and I remember just taking notes and probably overthinking it. And then I think it was around page 100 that suddenly I found myself hooked. And the next thing I knew, I just went through the whole series nonstop. And I was so fascinated by this whole entire, all 5 books. I was so in love with them and what Martin did, that I actually gifted book 1, Game of Thrones, to my dad. And my dad is an avid reader, but he's never read fantasy in his life. He had only read thrillers and suspense novels. And so I gifted him Game of Thrones. I just took a risk. I said, there's a little bit of a murder mystery in this book, so maybe you'll like it. Just, it's okay if you don't. Next thing you know, he was hooked. And the next thing you know, he was asking me, Joanna, with his Mexican accent, when is Martin coming out with the next book?
Well,
And he loved Tyrion. Tyrion was his favorite character.
Oh yeah.
He was completely hooked. He was completely hooked. And that's somebody who's never read fantasy in his life, has not read fantasy since, but but still I think that says something for what Martin was able to do. And I think for me personally, what I think made an impact on me was the fact that we got invested in so many different characters, and it wasn't just one, it wasn't just three, it wasn't just five, it was like I don't know how many characters he got me invested in. And not only male characters, but female characters, and even not only older characters, but young characters. So you just have such a spectrum of characters from different cultures and different backgrounds, and highlighting different parts of the world. Just, I think the uniqueness of world building and of character work and of plot, and how all those things were integrated, plus dragons and magic and lore. I don't know. I think he really did something special with this series. I think it's understandable why it's a favorite for so many.
I think something you touched upon that is for me the biggest seller. I mean, of course, the characters. I'm a character-driven reader, but the thing that I absolutely love is that it feels like this is a real world somewhere else. And I feel like there's very few books where I have that with, where I feel like I could talk about this forever and ever. We could sit here literally 24 hours straight and not get through all the things that we wanted to talk about with these books. And I love that. I feel like so invested, and there's so many theories and so many parts of the world we don't know, and it just feels lived in. And for immersion, there's nothing better than that.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess that could lead us to what we're hoping to get out of this reread this time, since I know some of you've reread it, at least Alex and Scott, you two have reread at least a few of the books a few times. And maybe, yeah, if you all want to share that, so we could start again with Yolene.
Well, I actually don't really know what to expect, because at this point it's been so long that I don't know what happened in the TV show and what happened in the books. It all mingled together in my head. But I think that I might have a completely different understanding now, because I've grown as a person, I've grown as a reader. I know when I was growing up that Dany was my favorite character. And I talked to a couple of fans, and they said, I don't think that you will like her now. I think that you will have some different people that you didn't connect to as a 14-year-old at the time, but you will connect to now in a different way. I'm not the biggest rereader either. There are like a couple of favorites that I might reread, but other than that, this is a new experience for me. So I'm just excited to see where I will now have more emphasis on, while maybe in the beginning I just swept over, because now we know how, well, not how the series is going to end, but how the fifth book is going and where everybody is going to be. So I think that I will look different at the characters.
Yeah, I feel that way too, Yolene. I mean, I think it was interesting because after watching the show and what happened with Daenerys' character, and I won't give away any spoilers, I remember being really kind of shocked and horrified because it wasn't how I interpreted things happening in the books. And a friend of mine said, no, if you read the books carefully, you'll see otherwise about that particular character. And I do know that the books have been criticized for things like the male gaze and things like that. I personally am not somebody who tends to be bothered by the male gaze. I do tend to struggle with issues of power balance when it comes to female characters and agency. Those things do get to me a bit. The male gaze, not quite so much, for what it's worth. But I am open to being a little more critical of some of those things. And I think it's okay to be critical of things, you know, so that doesn't take away from being able to love the books and enjoy them. But I do want to be open to the fact that maybe I've changed some ideas about things as I've gone on in my reading journey. Yeah. Joanna.
I hope that my views on Queen Dany never change, because she is, you know, I love her deeply, dearly, and probably forever. I mean, I can understand, even if it ends the way it ended on the show. Sometimes some bells make you go crazy. I don't know. But what I'm hoping to get out of this is just to share my love of these series with people who love it just as much as I do, or probably even more than I do. And that is just what I want most of it. And then I want to look for, because we know, I'm not going to spoil anything, but some stuff that happened at the very end of season 8 comes from George, specifically a specific thing that happens at the very end. And I want to see the foreshadowing for it. And just pick up on all the foreshadowing and the theories, and read more about the prophecy of Song of Ice and Fire, especially now with House of the Dragon and Rhaegar Targaryen, which we don't get nearly enough of. So that's what I'm here for.
Great. What about you, Scott?
I love to reread. So in the age of booktube, I would call it, these last 3 years that I've been either a fan and or participating, my rereading has gone down significantly. My reading level has gone up a lot, but I've been rereading a lot less, which hurts my heart a little bit because I love to reread. So for many reasons. One, because my memory stinks, so that's useful. 2, I feel like I'm making wise financial things, because if I purchase something and enjoy it many times, that's good. So yeah, so I'm excited about the reread. What I'm going to get out of it, I don't know. Probably I will get wrapped way up again into theories and all kinds of nonsense that I used to get involved in before I started venturing into many more things. So probably it'll take over my life, which is not good. And my wife will tell me you need to get new hobbies, but that's okay. I will figure it out. And I am super excited. So
just get her to join the read-along.
Exactly. I was just thinking that.
She is a TV person. She enjoys both of the shows a lot. I don't know I could ever get her to read the books, but I would love to try. So we'll see.
Oh, you should. It'd be fantastic. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably 2 main reasons. I think the first one is just one of the things that separates a series apart from a lot of other ones is the fact that it is so rereadable, is that when you go to reread it, you will find something new. And so every time that I've reread one of these books, I have a totally different look on something, whether it's a character or a certain event that happens. And I start, theorizing again and having totally new theories or reconfirmation of theories that I had to begin with. So I'm very much looking forward to just diving on into the series and see how my views of certain things have changed since the last time I read it. But also I'd say reading with a group, because I haven't read this with anyone else. This has always been like just a thing I read on my own. And if it's with anyone else, it's more of like me going online to places where people have read it before and theorizing with anonymous people, which can only get you so much enjoyment. But I'm very much looking forward to this, because I think we're all going to get a lot out of this, even if like we may go into a live discussion and think something about something that happened in the book, and someone else will bring up something that you just didn't even notice on that read. And I am very much looking forward to that kind of stuff too. So
sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Very well said. I also want to bring up, because I know Raph brought up how a friend brought me the first 3 audiobooks from the US in 2005 because I wanted to own them. Back then you had to get them in actual physical CDs. I remember that, and they weren't available in Europe. So I also wanted to ask about audiobooks, because a lot of people like to go that route, especially for rereading. And have any of you listened to the audiobooks, and your thoughts on
them? Roy Dotrice is not a good narrator. I like him anyway. It's sort of like an old grandfather telling a story, which is all right. If you're expecting someone that can do good female and younger voices, you're not going to find that with Roy. He is a classically trained stage actor, and he was, when he was alive. So some of it is kind of Shakespearean feeling and stuff, but if you're looking for a wonderful audio experience, you're not going to find that with these audiobooks. I've still listened to them countless times anyway. I still love them anyway.
Yeah.
So.
It's a surprise they don't have like a graphic audio.
That is surprising. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I'd tap that up immediately. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wanted to listen to them on audiobook, but then I heard numerous people tell me that I should not do that. Plus, I have the Folio Society editions, finally.
Oh, wow.
I am slowly collecting
So
the
nice.
last 2. So I am going to read it through that, although I know that a lot of people tell me, like, no, keep them in pristine condition, but I want to enjoy them. So I'm going to
They're
read
your books. Do what you
read
want.
them.
Yeah. I was looking at them the other day online. I only have the first one of the folio, and I was just looking at the other one. I was like, one day.
Exactly.
They're so pretty.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did listen to the audiobook of Fire and Blood, and that one was amazing. And I also listened to the audiobook of the Dunk and Egg stories, and that one is narrated by the actor who plays Viserys in the show. Not old Viserys, like Daenerys' brother Viserys. And
Was it really? I didn't know.
amazing, yeah,
Very
so
Lloyd.
good.
Good. He does the new one too, Rise of the Dragon, and
Yeah.
it's good narration.
Oh.
Nice.
That's cool. So I guess, yeah, I've heard that it seems like all the other books are pretty good via audio. So Fire and Blood's good via audio. The short stories are good via audio. Is that what Dunk and Egg? Can somebody tell me about those?
There are 3 novellas. Sorry, I didn't.
No, go for it.
There are 3 novellas, and they follow kind of the period of time in between House of the Dragon and the main series. So it follows a young kid named Egg. It's Aegon, as every name in Westeros is Aegon, and how he comes to become Aegon the Unlikely is the king. And I'm not spoiling anything because I think George says that in the preview to the series or whatever. So there's 3 novellas so far. He wants to do countless more, but as always, he wants to do a lot of things. We'll see if we get any. But I love Dunk. It's amazing. They're so good.
They're so good.
It's fantastic. At the end of the day, unabridged audio book is a good audiobook.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Raph has a unique perspective there. So I definitely understand his perspective there.
Which, by the way, we had mentioned that once we're done with the main 5, we may or may not move on to Fire and Blood and the Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So if you wanted to join us for that as well, you can.
That's right. Yeah.
I've never read those.
Me neither.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, then we're doing it. It's done deal.
We do it.
Yes.
You'd have no choice.
It wouldn't surprise me because I know, I mean, the way you feel when you get to the end of book 5 is you just can't help but want more.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also a reason why a lot of people don't read these books or don't pick them up. So do any of you want to give a case for why you should read A Song of Ice and Fire, even if it's an unfinished series or we might not get an end?
I'll talk if nobody else wants to, but my perspective is always different on these things because I don't separate series into finished and unfinished. I separate them into did I enjoy it or did I not? I don't care if the story's done because in my mind no story is ever really done, right? An ending is what's available to us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those characters don't live on and have other adventures and whatever the case may be. So I want more, obviously, but that's because I love the world and the characters in George's writing. I don't care if I ever see the actual ending as he envisions it or doesn't. I just want more. So if we get more, great. If we don't get more, I'm happy with what we do have. So that's how I
completely agree. And I think that the strongest case is all of us have read them and now we want to reread them, knowing how the 5th book ends. We still want to have that same experience. So I think if you're a first-time reader, you're not going to regret starting this series. And okay, it's the 5th book and you don't really know what happens afterwards, but I wouldn't want to deny this experience to anyone because it's just so great. And like Joanna also mentioned, it feels like an actual world. So it's never really finished. Even if we do get that last book, there are still going to be some threads that are left unfinished, and that's up to your own imagination.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly said. I think that's the thing too, is like when I read any book, I mean, I can understand it from one point of view because there is something beautiful about reading a series and getting a very satisfying ending. But I am much more about the journey at the same time. And I think that's beautifully said what you said, Scott, about how it's almost like some stories, they might not ever have an end in a way. Like things can have an openness to it. So I don't know. I think it's still worth it. I still say it's worth it.
Yeah.
My favorite writer is Robin Hobb, and George is my second favorite. And with Hobb, she had an unbelievable, amazing ending with Tawny Man and could have left it right there, but she kept writing. And then she had my favorite ending in fantasy at the end of Fitz and the Fool. And I'm still not satisfied. I want more because I know there could be more. So, in my mind, just keep giving me good stuff if you can. And if you can't, I'll enjoy what you have provided. That's how I look at it with authors.
That's fascinating. I love that.
Yeah, I would also say, I mean, the impact of the series overall is so massive that I feel like, and there's a reason for it. And I think there's the same reason the show became so popular, the same reason why people absolutely love this series more than anything else that they've ever read. Even if they don't read fantasy outside of A Song of Ice and Fire, they will love this series.
Yep.
So I would say, I mean, I think it's worth the reread or worth reading for the first time just because it's just such a great story. And so even if you never get the actual ending or, get that last book in this main A Song of Ice and Fire set of books, I think the journey along the way is so incredibly good that it'll be worth it. I don't think you will regret reading it. I've never heard someone say they've regretted reading it. So
no.
Yeah. I agree.
I mean, my only comment that I can add to the beautiful stuff you guys have said is I inked it in my skin. I will always. I was talking with my friend the other. Okay, you need to know this about me, and we're gonna establish things clearly. So first of all, English is not my native language, so if I say things the wrong way, I'm sorry. And the second thing is I'm sometimes a bleak person, hence grimdark. And I was talking with a friend the other day, and I was like, if I die, please make sure I get cremated with Words of Radiance and Storm of Swords, so that I can have my ashes mingle with those books forever. So I mean, if that's not an argument, I don't know. There's nothing else
I know that is hardcore.
Yeah.
Wow.
I haven't told my mom yet because she's probably the one who's gonna, have to deal
Two
with
amazing choices. I love Words of Radiance as well. So
right.
excellent.
So I'll have to pick a hot book as well. So
yeah.
Wow.
I'm also a bit crazy, so I mean,
it's good. We need that.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, for me, something about the way that Martin was able to pull together so many different elements at the same time, like I said, political intrigue and character work and developing this sort of sprawling world, the way he was able to do all those things and not neglect one thing for the other thing, it's still unbelievable to me. So I guess that's sort of a huge highlight that I look forward to revisiting about it. And I like the fact that even though there is magic in the world and there are things like dragons, it's still kept rather mysterious, and it doesn't seem to help the characters very much.
Yeah.
And he uses it sparingly, which I think makes it more impactful. I've always enjoyed the way that it's kind of sparsed out in little itty bitty bites.
Yeah.
You forget it's fantasy sometimes, All of a sudden there's this fantasy element. You're like, wait, what? And oh yeah, this is a fantasy show.
Yeah, it reads like historical fiction at many points. That's true.
It does. Even just the relationship with the different religions and things like that almost feel almost mysterious, and as they are in our real world, like almost like, is that real or not?
Right. For sure.
Let's see. Great. I think that's about it as far as ideas I had for what we're introducing. Does anybody have any questions in the chat about the read along? I know I mentioned the schedule. We're still going to be figuring out as we go along, but I can confirm that the first discussion will happen again on my channel on February 4th, followed by another discussion focusing probably on introduction to characters. I think that might be the theme of that discussion, since we're being introduced to so many characters in that first book, maybe impressions of them. So that will be a discussion happening a week later on Saturday, same time. But aside from that, let me know if you all have any questions. I'll check the chat. And I know, by the way, I should mention, so Overly Average Ben is here in the chat. And I know that Ben and Grace are going to be doing this read along. I'm so excited.
Both awesome. Subscribe to both.
Yes, Ben is fantastic. He's so funny, and so is Grace. They're wonderful. And I'm hoping they'll join us in some live shows for this too.
Oh, yeah.
And they are also going to be having a section in their Discord. They have a Grace and Ben Discord as well. They're also going to have a Song of Ice and Fire section in the Discord. I forgot to mention that too.
Very cool.
Yeah. But let me know. I'm just checking the chat to see if there are any questions. But Yay, fantastic. But please let me know if you all have anything more to say about the series or anything else you wanted to share.
Yeah, the only question I have is I'm not that well prepared, but is it one book per month or what are we going to do?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I think what we mentioned, we were talking about the schedule. I think we're still figuring that out right now.
Mhm.
So the only thing that's confirmed right now is that we'll definitely have the Game of Thrones one at the very beginning of February. And then Joanna, you have the second book. Do you have an
Yes.
idea about how soon after you'd want to approach that?
I was thinking maybe it depends always on when I am able to take holidays and stuff, but I was maybe thinking beginning/middle of March. Because February is a shorter month. I don't want anyone to have to squish
That's
Clash
true.
of Kings. So maybe
Mhm.
middle of March and then the third week of March for the House of the Undying discussion.
That would be perfect. So
Yeah.
middle of March, and that
Yeah.
gives us I think that's a perfect time frame. And then I guess next would be Alex, and I don't know if you're thinking that far ahead, Alex. And Alex, by the way, is also going to be reading Malazan, Book of the
I
Fallen.
am.
But you
Yeah.
are? Oh, no,
At the
I
same
can't do
time.
it.
Yeah.
A lot to do at once.
Big one.
Yeah. A Storm of Swords is gonna be interesting. I don't know if we're gonna be if we should do it in a month or not. I guess it depends. I think we'll just get a general consensus of everyone that's involved at that point and kind of go from there. But I'd be open to either one. So
Yeah. So I think our idea here is probably going to be a month and a half, I'm going to guess, average between books, a month and a half to 2 months. They do
Mhm.
get a bit chunky. I think they get bigger as you go on in the series too.
Mhm.
So we're
Yeah.
going to
Storm of
be
Swords and Answer, the two biggest ones. They're both
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty chunky. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what we can say too is we can all maybe agree here that we'll just update everybody on Discords or on our channels as to when those live shows will happen, even if they're on
Yep.
other people's channels. I'll definitely be updating everyone as soon as I have updates, and that way everybody will be in the loop as to where we are.
I saw there was a question about which books we're reading, and if it's only the 5 main. And so we mentioned that we may read Fire and Blood and the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms as well.
Joanna and I are very pro read everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
We read Rise of the
I wanna
Dragon,
read
World of
everything.
Ice and Fire.
Read it all. That's right.
Oh, there's the 3 short stories. You know, the Rogue Prince, the Princess,
Rogue
and the
Prince.
Queen. All that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to read those as well. So
Those are, you have to get the collections, I think, to get those. So those are a little tougher to come
Yeah.
by. But they're very good. They're very good as well.
Ben, you're breaking my heart.
It's so funny because I remember the first time I read the series, I was thinking, oh, they're such big books and I read so slowly. By the time I finish book 5, he'll have finished the 6th book.
He's making good progress, okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
3/4 of the
yeah.
way through.
75%.
Yeah.
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 75%. Maybe by the time we're done reading everything, including The World of Ice and Fire, Rise of the Dragon, and all that, maybe he'll be like, hey, guys, I have an announcement to make. So,
Perfect
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah.
otherwise, we'll discuss House of the Dragon Season 2 and, you know.
Are you all going to be rewatching the show at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably. I started rewatching it when House of the Dragon aired, just like in between episodes. Didn't do a full rewatch or anything, but the first couple.
I have a
seasons are
few
so good.
episodes I always rewatch, but I haven't gone through and done a full rewatch in a long time.
No.
Yeah.
Mine neither.
Battle of the
I
Bands
always
I watch a lot.
Yeah,
and
so good.
Winds of Winter is my favorite episode of TV ever, any medium. So yeah,
I always watch favorite scenes. Like yesterday before bed, I watched some of my favorite scenes, and I was like,
Yeah.
exactly. That's what I do as well. But I think that I will wait long enough and just read the books, just so I have a clear idea in my head. These are the books. This is the show.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
That
You know,
would
I
be
have
great. Oh,
I
sorry.
have the same issue that you mentioned earlier, Yolene, where I actually have this issue, and I think this is probably why I don't watch a lot of adaptations in general, is that I do love adaptations for the most part, but the problem is if I watch an adaptation after I read a book, it will completely alter my memory of the book. Completely.
Yeah.
So, House of the Dragon is a unique one because Fire and Blood, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's an in-world historical text. So it's not a novel in the general sense. And it's really 3 or 4 different accounts of what may have happened. So it isn't really possible for the show to deviate because we don't know what the right account is anyway.
Yeah.
So they're just picking a path in most cases, or choosing one that wasn't in the book, which is possible too, because we didn't have everybody's viewpoint. So it's actually a really cool thing to adapt in that sense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I liked having the background knowledge of the book,
Mhm.
because then you see, if you treat a show as canon, then you see how it actually happens
Right.
and what survived throughout history.
And you can do that with Rise of the Dragon too, because it just picks one path and says this is what happened. So that's an encyclopedia version. That's the one that came out a couple weeks ago. So that's another way to go about that.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I really am looking forward to rewatching at least some of the episodes. I happen to be somebody who I do appreciate the show, at least the first couple of seasons. I was a bit disappointed with the last season, as a lot of people are last couple of seasons. But I always like my own personal thoughts were that I've always preferred the books. And not only that, I know a lot of friends who got into the show and have not read the books. And that always shocked me. Actually, I really admire people who could do that. I know Roger.
It's like my family.
Yeah.
My brothers never read them.
I had a lot of friends that never read it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who've done that. And I'm actually really impressed with those people, because I know for me, when I watched the show, I was thinking, how do people understand what's happening? Because I feel like the books, like there's so many details in the show that are subtly hinted at, or just kind of gotten through a bit quickly, that I felt like I was in the know because I had read the books. So I'm impressed if people can follow the show really well without having read books.
One of the reasons you really dislike them, assuming the last season, is because the writers don't know how to do setup and payoff. So George, that's probably one of his biggest strengths as a writer. So when they were following his source material, they understood how to set things up and pay them off, both character beats and the story. But then the last couple seasons, you don't know what's going to happen or how things tie together. It's just a bunch of randomness. And that's one of many reasons none of us enjoyed what happened those last couple seasons.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because even though I say that I don't watch a lot of adaptations these days, the funny thing about it is that's actually how I found BookTube. Is because I was watching the last season and I was thinking, I wanted somebody to talk about it with. I didn't have anybody to talk about it with, but I had some frustrations and I wanted to find out what other people were thinking. And I found Daniel Green's video in which he was critiquing that last season. And I loved his critique. I loved his video on that at the time. And I thought, yes, I feel seen and heard. And then that's how I found out about BookTube, actually, oddly.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
He was my intro to BookTube as well. He was the first video I watched. So
But I just think it's funny because it wasn't even about books. It was an adaptation video. So
mine was about books, but yeah, I get it. That's good.
Yeah. But you all are doing good work, Scott, with getting people into BookTube, I bet, with like adaptation.
I hope so. I don't know. I don't know if I'm doing good work or not, but I hope so.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Just trying to catch up in the chat here. I wanted to watch the show, but wasn't a fan of the hour-long episode format back then. Now I am, but near the end, people were spoiling like crazy. Yeah.
That's something that also happens with the House of the Dragon. Everywhere, people who have just watched the show are just happy and they're like, "Oh, I'm dying to see what happens." And then you have people who spoil it for them, like, "Oh, I read the book. This and this and this happened." And I really don't understand why you would do that. It's like you don't get a medal because you have read the book. Just let people enjoy it.
It's like all of Twitter after each episode of House of the Dragon. I was just like, God.
Yeah, you need to not open Twitter if you want to be spoiled.
House
of the
I
Dragon
just scroll on. I just scrolled on and kind of ignored it.
So dangerous.
House
And
of the
installed
Dragon,
it.
the second problem that they assume everybody has already watched Game of Thrones, so they spoil Game of Thrones like crazy while going through.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is true.
Well, I'll probably reach out to you all when I finally watch House of the Dragon, so I could finally have.
I hope so.
I could have somebody to
I
talk
can't
to
wait.
about it.
Yeah.
Because by then everybody will have watched it. Nobody will want to talk about it, but also I'll be like the one person.
We'll
always want to talk.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Great. That sounds good. Yeah. Yes. And I know Jimmy, by the way, is now hosting, I think, or co-hosting a podcast for A
Bend
Song
the
of Ice
Knee.
and Fire.
That's so
Mhm.
cool.
So we're going to have him.
He was on when we talked about this
Definitely.
original plan of doing this read along. Do you remember? He was there.
Yeah. And I think he was interested in doing it again, but he was
Yeah.
also rereading it at the time. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he
he had
wasn't a
reread it this
co-host to
year.
bend the knee yet, so
yeah, Jimmy's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really loves this series. He really
yeah.
loves the series.
Mhm.
I know Mike obviously loves this series.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know this series gets labeled grimdark. Do you all think that label is appropriate?
not
It was the
anymore.
grimmest and darkest thing that I read when I read it. I don't know
Exactly.
if that's
Yeah,
the
that's the
case
thing.
anymore.
Like, yeah, the first time I read it, but I don't know.
I think it will depend on the ending of the series as well,
Mhm.
which at this point we don't know. But for me, when I read it, I didn't know that grimdark existed.
I mean, I don't
So I
think it
Yeah.
really did the way that we're talking about it nowadays.
Right.
and now I think it's not grimdark, but if you really detest grimdark, I don't know if you would enjoy the series. You need to at least be able to enjoy grimdark a little bit to appreciate this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of horrific stuff that happens, and you have to
Mhm.
be okay with that. Like
Yeah.
that's just one
Yeah.
of the points that's going to happen in the series.
Yeah. And like subverting expectations and stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And having morally great
Very well.
characters, I think that's the one of the because visually speaking, yes, if you don't like the horror stuff or the disgusting stuff, but if you need your characters to be good or bad and clearly good and clearly bad and always
Not the
making
right
the right
series.
choice, then this is not for you.
Yeah,
true.
exactly. I think something that I will also have a hard time with changing my perspective is in the show a lot of the characters are older, and
Mhm.
it's
It's true.
it's a
That's
good choice
true.
that they age them up
Yeah.
a little bit, especially for some graphic content. But
Yes.
it will be difficult because in my mind, Danny is 20 plus. But in the books at the beginning, she's 13, something like that.
12 or
So
Oh,
13.
that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
I remember that feeling very racy when I read that.
Mhm.
It probably still will be, but just thinking, what's happening here? Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I never thought of books in terms of dark fantasy versus light fantasy or anything like that, but I was impressed even back then 10 years ago with how I was conscious of the fact that Martin does play with your sense of morality.
Mhm.
And the way he does that, I think is interesting. So, I think rather than just making characters who are good, who do bad things. You see characters that you grow to that do horrible things, and then he introduces characters that kind of do worse things, and then he
Yep.
puts them together with those characters. And by contrast, the character that did the horrible thing way back then doesn't look as horrible
Sure.
anymore,
Oh,
or
yeah.
you feel like they get redeemed in some way. So yeah, that'll be some interesting. There will be some interesting discussions regarding morality in this series.
Yeah.
For sure. Look forward to it.
Yeah. Gritty pseudo medieval fantasy. Overly gritty. Yeah.
With dragons and wolves.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I think that about wraps up my questions and thoughts, things to consider when getting into this series. Yes, it's not finished. Yes, it's worth it. You're going to enjoy it. Yes, it's not maybe the tamest fantasy regarding content, but still worth your time if you're interested. And especially
Oh,
if you
yeah.
enjoyed the show, you definitely should read these books.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yes.
Oh my god.
All right. So I guess that's it for me. Does anybody else have any final words or thoughts?
I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Again, in the Grimoire Discord is going to be linked in my description below, but you could also find us in various places, obviously, out there on Discords or on Twitter. I think all of us are on Twitter and Instagram, possibly, but maybe Twitter. Okay, Twitter. We'll just say Twitter and Discord. And we all have
I'm
channels.
too old for some things. I can do too.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fair. All right. Well, thank you all so much. And I appreciate everybody who showed up in the chat. And we'll all see you, I guess, at least on February 4th for the first live
Yes.
show. So thank you again for
Oh, yeah.
joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye
See
bye.
you guys.